Mhm. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stream and Hub Radio. I am Sage Stevens, the host of Shout Out with Sage. My guest today is a versatile singer, songwriter, and producer known for his infectious positive energy and knack for crafting memorable songs. He's co written for Grammy winning multi platinum artist Macy Gray, including her most recent single with Big Freedia, I Am. He has performed for KTLA and the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, if you're into hockey, as well as scored music placements with major brands like T-Mobile, Wendy's, the NBA, and the NFL. Today on Shout Out with Sage, I want to welcome TREVAN to the show. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good, Sage. Thank you so much for having me, and how serendipitous that this worked out for this time together.
Cool. Thanks so much. So you have a song out with Macy Gray called I Am with Big Freedia. How did that opportunity come about for you?
It's really cool. So I was working on an album. I had slated to work on an album with Michael Blue. His big claim to fame, he co-produced Colby Caillat's first album, which had Bubbly on it. Starts in my toes, makes me crinkle my nose.
Okay, yeah.
I had worked under him as a writer-producer for a while, and I was doing this new album. And before we got started, the night before we were going to start, he texted me and says, by the way, Macy Gray's here, because she would go and rehearse at his studio with her band if you want to come and hang out. So I went there. I got to meet her. I had to try not to fanboy out too much. I grew up listening to her stuff as a kid. Like my family always played her first album all the time. And from that time forward, anytime she'd be at the studio rehearsing, many times I would be there either working on projects or things like that. And I just started hanging out and being around her. And I would freestyle around her, basically.
Okay.
I would sing ideas and things. And it eventually, culminated in her saying, like, man, you got to be here when we do my record. I was like,
okay, sign me up.
I'm there. And it actually started with a song called Christmas with You, which was an original Christmas song that came out first. I was a writer on that. Okay. And then she had this idea for this other song. I was in there with, it was also one of the main producers on it, along with Michael, was young Josh, who's he's worked with Alicia Keys and a lot of pretty big people as well. Really talented guy. So we're all in the room, and my main thing as a writer was the top line side of it. So, helping to come up with the chorus with the like, I am who I am, that sort of melody and everything was the main piece I got to play in that song. And if you listen to that chorus, actually, and you hear in the backgrounds, like when it does the FU part and things like that, you can actually hear my voice in those like gang vocals and stuff too.
Okay. Very cool. How important then is networking and just, schmoozing, schmingling, let's say, in music or to get jobs?
It's such a great question because I never consciously think of it as networking. It's always been more so this like is when I
organic sort of just happen.
Yeah, like because I did have a lot of times where I would try to force things to happen. You'd be in groups and think like, and then either maybe I would be too aggressive or I would be or a lot of times maybe I've learned more and more now to trust when things don't line up. Sometimes it's for the better, and oftentimes I'll see as time moves on that person I might have thought I wanted to meet or connect with or work with. I'll just see what they start to work on. I'm like, oh, that's not even really anything that I personally would say I align with or that I would really maybe even want to be a part of. But I do believe when things show up around you, again, the fact that Michael just says, hey, by the way, Macy Gray is here. And again, of all the people at that moment in time, and the fact that I grew up listening to her all the time, I think it was just such an organic, like my true like appreciation to get to meet her and be around her.
Yeah, she's an artist that you really do love and would love to meet. So it wasn't just some big artist that you had no affinity for. Yeah.
100%. Yes. Very well said. Very well said.
Cool. What is the best piece of advice you would give to someone who was looking to get into music and make that big move to LA?
It's so interesting because I'm actually born and raised out here. So I grew up, I was born in Northridge, and I've grown up my whole life basically living in LA. And it is funny how many times I'm at events or things and I tell people that and they're like, oh, like you're a unicorn. Like most people are people who have moved here. But I would say what I'm continuing to learn all the time is always to really be able to trust what feels good to you and what feels authentic to you. I'd say the challenge, but also greatest part of my journey has always been like, well, what's really true to me and what is something that I think I have to be or I have to do to be successful or to achieve success? Because we have these ideas of what success is, and we have all these people who are now with social media portraying certain images or ideas of what success is or looks like. And it can be so easy to feel like you either need to conform to that or you need to become that or you need to do the same thing if you want to reach that kind of success. But I would say being able to define what your parameters of success are. And it should always start, like for me, I think the greatest success is when I can internally feel like I'm at home with myself. That's probably the greatest form, because then it doesn't really matter what's going on around me. It doesn't matter if I'm like, financially, I'm not doing so great right now, or I've got a whole bunch of money right now, or like I'm with this artist or I'm not with this artist. If I can still feel that sort of at homeness within myself, that and everything else becomes a gift from that space, I would say. So if you're planning to move to LA and you want to pursue it, to at least be able to truly prioritize your own well-being in that process and not try to think like, because the other lesson I continue to learn is thinking, oh, when this happens, suddenly then I will feel the success.
Yeah, you'll feel like you made it, like that you reached that pinnacle. But it's like, to me, you reach one thing and then you should be setting new goals to go to the next thing, right? So
it's a perpetual cycle. Exactly. And so to realize like, okay, that's not really going to fulfill you unless you truly love the work or you love the process or you, again, feel like that, at least within yourself, what you're doing aligns with who you aim to be and how you want to impact the world. Because a lot of times what I see too is it's not even about the doing of the thing or reaching the thing you think it is. It's meeting or touching or impacting the people along the way. That sometimes is actually what you're really there to do. Sometimes I'll be in a session and it's not even about the song or that thing, but it's almost more about how me and the other people interact and how we might have a conversation that suddenly might change the way I look at things, change the way they look at things, open them up to being more honest with themselves, those kind of things. So that was a very long-winded answer, and I don't know if I really nailed what you were asking, but I hope that gives a good sense for anyone who is thinking, that would be my advice, is just to really make sure that you're always checking in here and that you have a support system around you, even if it's one person that, helps you do that.
Do you think then, like, having a good, having friends around you and having that, what's the word I'm looking for? Like having that support system, that's what I was looking for. Having a support system, is that really important to, being successful?
Oh, 100%. Yes, I would say so. Because we can even look at people that we might deem as being successful, but if they don't have those support systems around them, those often tend to be the ones who go on these very destructive paths, or self-destructive things start to happen because they either maybe can't handle what's happening to them or they can't truly receive it. And I think whether it's a Taylor Swift or certain artists you can look at, a lot of times I think they're able to sustain or keep building because they have an incredible support system around them, whether that's their family or friends that can at least help keep grounded while the rest of the world seems in many ways like it's just exploding or, there's just chaos everywhere you go. For me, I would say my mom has been the greatest support system in that regard because, first of all, she's the one who will always be saying to me, like, you're already successful, Trav, even though you don't think you are because you're still always aiming at that next thing. Right. She's always been that voice and reminder. And she'll always be the one to say, like, don't you remember not long ago, you were like, man, if I could just be working in a professional studio, or man, if I could, and you've already like done that. And now you've almost moved on from that. So you've already,
you have to remember your wins, like as you go, because like a year after you're like, oh, I haven't done anything. But then when you look backwards, you have made those steps and you have achieved those things. So
100%. Yes, exactly. Exactly, Sage.
like you aren't where you started is what, like you're not, you have
Yeah.
made some progress.
Yes. Like, I mean, do you feel, you've lived so much in your journey as well. I don't know if it fits
Yeah.
to ask you, but what your process has been like to do that same thing, whether it's a support system or something around you. Have you found that to be the case as well? Like having, even if it's just one person or a couple of people that, like you can confide in or turn to when those questions happen?
Yeah, like I definitely have one or two people that I can confide in and be, my true self. Because a lot of people you can't really be your true self around. You still have to put on that facade of I've got everything together and there's no problems and I'm just doing bigger and better. Like you can't tell certain people any of the negative, like, of what you are trying of the business or what you're trying to do, because then they'll, just look, just not take you the way you want to be taken, right? So
Yes.
having those one or two people that you can really, really be true with and be open and vulnerable and I had a bad day, or I'm scared, or this didn't happen the way I wanted it and this person was mean to me, or you just want that sounding board without any, I guess maybe I should well, I've had a therapist, but maybe I should still be going to the
Yes. Oh my
therapist,
gosh,
right?
yeah, right, right. So true though. Yes, those people you don't have to put on the front.
Right. Because you know how I mean, what do you feel about that? There's definitely a facade and a front that you have to put on, and you can't show people that, maybe you have any doubt, or, something didn't happen the way you wanted it to. I just feel sometimes you really have to hold back. What do you think about that?
I would agree, or at least I know I feel my own internal pressure around that idea. And it has been interesting at times where I've shared vulnerably on social media, maybe, or done things, and to see how much response I get, or people will say, "Oh my God, thank you," because I have a hard time letting myself admit I'm having a hard time, or to even just know it's okay that you're not thriving. Even something, it seems like a tangent, but just to hear like lions sometimes can sleep up to 20 hours within a day.
Sign
Like,
me up.
right? Like this idea, like, because
Not every day, but
but yeah, like just like, if you have a lot of exertion, and I certainly I think that's part of why I got sick. I mean, this weekend I saw you that Friday night. I didn't get a lot of
Yeah.
sleep. I had a thing for the K-Rock Almost Acoustic Christmas on Saturday. Then I had two gigs back to back Sunday. I ended up singing almost 5 hours in total on Sunday. And then, just not getting a lot of sleep and probably not eating the best.
Right.
So I suddenly end up getting sick. I have such a hard time, like, just sleep. It's okay now. Like today, you have no obligations, just chill and rest. I'm like, no, like I've got to keep moving and I've got to keep getting closer to the thing that I'm aiming towards.
What is that thing that you're aiming for, since you mentioned it?
I mean, and truthfully, to get to that space where financially there's like enough that I and my family are just taken care of. And in a lot of ways, we sort of are at this moment in time. And it's fascinating to think that so much of it just comes from me and my guitar, which is such a gift. But that to me, at least, to know, I guess there's like that sense of stability and safety from that. And of course, the other dream is to be able to, like, as a singer-songwriter, touring all over and getting to open for big artists that whether it's a Taylor Swift or a Jason Mraz or a John Mayer, all these people and to get to meet them and interact with them would be such a gift too. Yeah, those would be my ideas of success. And as I said, to feel like that sense of internal, like, you are enough. Even if those things aren't happening, Trev, you are
Right.
enough.
Right. Which one of those musicians or another musician is the one that you really, really want to collaborate with or work with?
I Oh, I will say this. Taylor Swift. It would be Taylor Swift for sure. It's funny. I would do these gigs. I mean, a lot of my times I do cover gigs and things like that. And for quite a while, I kept telling I would say mid performance, my hope and goal is one day that Taylor Swift and I will do like a musical together, kind of like Grease, but a different, not
Okay.
exactly, but and I would be the male and she'd be the female lead, and I don't know what it would be, but that to me would just be like, and just to meet her and get to ask, because I mean, talk about someone who's lived through experiences most people couldn't even fathom,
Right.
and to know that level of, I would say even her audience and her fan base are people are like, I think the same kind of folks I would aim to reach to, and whether that's kids, families, things like that, and to be a beacon of acceptance and love and things like that is something I certainly aspire to.
Mm.
So yes, Taylor Swift, I think would be right up there as the top.
When someone comes to you with, with a project, how do you decide what to say yes to or what to pass on?
I love that you asked this. So I have a really hard time with that
Mm.
because, and this is where again, my mom is such a great support system, because she even will say things like, you really do have FOMO. Like you really have a big, like I have to, like if something shows up, she's like, it's like, it could even be something that clearly is not something you probably
Right for you. Right.
but you think like, but I think, well, maybe this is an opportunity to, and my mind will turn into something like, maybe this is a chance to stretch myself and do something that's not comfortable, do something that's a little out of the box. So I can find ways to make it make sense. But what's interesting, I love that you're asking this now, because this past weekend in particular, I felt like I really got to meditate on, there were quite a few things around me, some with a friend of mine who's working on scripts and stuff. And I want to do some co-writing with him and maybe even act in some of the stuff he's doing.
Right.
And other things. And to really sit and think like, is this really for me where I'm at? Does this really align with what I'm aiming towards? And I guess, again, it coming back to like being able to acknowledge when something, even if it's a small thing, you could look at and go like, that doesn't quite align for me. Normally I might overlook it, but in this moment in time, because I'm learning to know myself more, I can notice that and say, if I was almost looking at little Trev as a kid who was like getting ready to go do this, how would I feel as an adult looking out for him? Like, is that really the environment I would want him to go in? Or is that something that, or if he really wants to, I would want to make sure I at least check in and be clear. Is this really, like, just so you understand? And again, my mom helping me to understand the obligations that come with those things too. So it's not like I could think it's like, I'm just going to show up and do this thing, and being reminded, no, it's going to involve all these other things to do that. So just make sure you're clear, and that's going to take away from other things.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the biggest piece of sage advice that someone's given to you in your career that really resonated with you and has helped you or not helped you?
Right. That's a good question. There were like two pieces to that. I know one of them, and I don't know if this might have been like a different question that we were going to get a chance to talk about, but I did have a mentor. He was a friend of mine growing up. His dad, he had worked with Stevie Wonder, Paul McCartney. He worked on the Lion King soundtrack. He and the guys he worked with, they did all the choir vocals for Lion King, Like a Prayer, Man in the Mirror, like a lot of these big songs. So he did a lot of that stuff. And I would confide in him a lot in the early days, trying to understand. He would teach me also about the business side of stuff and how to understand publishing and these things. But I remember one time he gave me this thing that I think it's a great piece of advice when it comes to the idea of branding. He was like, you never open up a can of Coke and taste Sprite. And I think what he was trying to help me understand was, because I was the guy who's like, I want to be the artist that does all of it. I do the rap, I can rap, I produce, it's heavy, all this. And he's like, like, Trev, if you could just find what your Coca-Cola is and put that in. If you want to make Sprite, put it over in the Sprite can. But if you're going to have Coca-Cola, find what that is. And so I would start to ask, like, what is my Coca-Cola? What is my thing that I can consistently feel like this is who I am and this is what I deliver and this is what I bring? So I've been stepping more into that, I would say. So that I would say that was just a good piece of advice that took me a long time to understand. And maybe the other thing would be, well, it could be a mixture actually, but I know, again, like my mom continuing to tell me too, being my own authentic self at the end of the day is the most important thing. And because and it's hard to know, because even as a young man, I understand not most people don't even have the kind of relationship my mom and I have in terms of the level of unconditional love and support.
Yeah, it's so far you've mentioned her quite a few times. I'm like, it's definitely
really,
parent-child relationship goals, I think.
it's what I hope for. But the weirdest thing was growing up, and I never want to put my dad on blast necessarily, but he would make me feel a lot of shame and guilt for how close my mom and I were. Like, it's kind of like that. It made me weaker. So I think that created this split where it's like, oh, I'm grateful to have this support, but I also feel like I have to like reject it because I need to. And when I would do that, a lot of times that's when I would step into situations that maybe weren't healthy for me or weren't as good, or, I would seek out things to try and prove
how like macho you are.
How macho I can be. It's exactly. And it rarely results in a good thing. But I'd also say, funny enough, my dad too, actually. So he was a musician. My introduction to music was being born to one of his songs playing in the delivery room and idolizing him. But he would always say too, like, no one can tell you who you are. Like, for me to truly trust, like, even when people, if they say like it's not good, don't, just keep moving forward. Like, you're going to get so many no's. Keep moving forward. So I can appreciate that too.
So to not let the no's deter you from where you want to go. Did you always want to get into music then? Like, music was always there for you and it was your direction that you chose?
Funny enough, I thought I was going to be an actor as a kid. And in many ways I am, but
yeah, definitely. You're performing when you're on stage, for sure.
Exactly. Consciously as a kid, I always thought acting, because I loved Jim Carrey, I loved Robin Williams, I loved movies. Music, funny enough, was always a part of me, but I suppose I just didn't think of it as something I would pursue, because it almost just seemed like it was just there. But I was playing drums like as a kid. We had these toy drum sets. I had like 2 of them that were destroyed within a week because I was playing them so hard. But once, funny enough, I was supposed to go to a certain middle school. It didn't work out. So I ended up having to go to a public middle school, and it totally shifted my whole direction. But that's where I met a lot of the kids that were starting bands.
Okay.
And that's what suddenly made it where I was like, ooh, like, yes. Like, so like it opened that pursuit. And then from that point on, yes, I would say music was always like, somehow I'm going to make something happen with this. I don't know what it is, but started as a drummer. Then I got into learning guitar, slowly got into singing, then learned how to produce, learned all these different facets that came together. So yes, I would say music has continued to be the dominant focal point for most of my life.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And now we're going to give a little shout out to our sponsor today for the show. So I want to thank the sponsor of today's show, Rage the Label, for their hats that are crafted for those who dare to stand out. So here's some of the hats they have. And we have all these different colors.
Ooh.
So yes, they're really cool. They have like they're 3D. So I want to thank Sage.
Thanks, Sage, for the rage.
Rage with Sage, yes.
Rage
actually,
with Sage.
We need to discuss that with them. So,
yes.
so I want to thank ragethelabel.com. And if you use the promo code RageSage, then you get 10% off. So cool. Yay.
Thank you, Rage.
Thank you. Okay. So back to you, Trevan. With your music, where do you want to be in, like, let's say 5 years?
I would say for sure opening for all the big artists that I've mentioned, and a lot of them, whether that's Jason Mraz, John Mayer, Jack Johnson, Third Eye Blind, a lot of the classic artists too, like Goo Goo Dolls, but then of course Taylor Swift. That would be the, you know, she took Shawn Mendes out on his first major tour when she was doing, I think, and then she took Ed Sheeran out on his first like big tour, like opening for her. So she really has a great legacy, I think, of spotting
talent,
great talent and giving them a big platform. So that would be total dream come true. And I would say just continuing to perform and continuing to realize that I myself as a singer-songwriter am enough. I think a lot of these other things that I've taken on over the years, it's always partly been because I was like, well, I don't know if I'm good enough as just a singer-songwriter. And I'm continuing to realize that I am. I mean, so many things I've been able to do, the majority of all my income at this moment in time, all that stuff has mostly just been from me and this guy right here.
Right. Speaking of that, what challenges have you faced as an independent musician artist, and how do you overcome those?
Well, I would say my biggest challenge, and it's not from an ego standpoint by any means, but because I have so many giftings in different areas, whether that's as a drummer, like most of the people that have known me, when they see me on drums, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like when I was deciding I wanted to try to focus more on singing and things like that, even my uncle was like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like, no, drums, just keep doing drums. You're so good. So having so many voices, like even when I decided to kind of shift away from producing for a while, I had a very dear friend of mine who's a ridiculously talented producer and songwriter who has worked with tons of big people and all that. And he's like, dude, like, how can you give up producing? No, like, don't give up producing. You're too good at it. I would say that the biggest challenge of having other people's opinions coming at you and how to be clear on what really, for me, what really feels right for me though, because sometimes someone could say something and it can make sense. You can see it like, yes, I'm a very talented producer, but if my heart is saying to go this way, even if that doesn't look like the path that can necessarily lead to the greatest success logically, that has been my greatest challenge in navigating the music industry. And having so many people coming to me like, yo, we got to do something together. Yo, let's do this, man. Like I gotta have you come do this and do that. And normally I would just be like, yeah, like that sounds good. And then after being, what the hell did I just agree to?
Exactly. When you start to work on a song and you're creating it, how do you know when the song is actually finished?
You know, I have a hard time knowing, I have to admit. I am that perfectionist who will keep ruminating over something. I would say I've learned to accept when something is like, sometimes it's even like, okay, this is in my own way, this is good enough. This is like, it's not worth over obsessing over all these little details. There's such a great example where like Michael Jackson was mixing Beat It for the album Thriller, and they got up to like 60 mixes or something. And
wow.
But then Quincy Jones leans in. He's like, you know, what the heck are you guys doing in here? And they play him their newest mix that they're so proud of. He's like, okay, play me mix 2. They go back and play that one. He's like, yeah, that's the one. This example where I've had to learn to, as long as it's something I can feel like I gave my best to it. But truthfully, I have a very hard time.
I'm sort of like that with pictures. Yeah, because and like really, usually it's the first one. When I go back, it's usually the first one or the last one that I usually always select.
Interesting.
I mean, if I'm just like, you know, out and about doing things myself or with friends, but yeah, but you know, you just want to keep going.
Right. It's always the first two, right? Because that's like when you're not thinking about it. It's kind of the idea of beginner's luck. I think there's some science to that because you're not in your head about it yet.
Yeah, you're not in your head yet. So you're just not thinking too much yet.
Yes.
Well, how do we find you online?
So you can either go to my website, Trevan Music, TREVAN music.com. All social media platforms are pretty much Trevan Music or at Trevan Music, except for I think YouTube is just Trevan, TREVAN. Yeah, those would be the best. And then Spotify, Apple, YouTube, it's all just Trevan, TREVAN, all caps.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here today. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
I would just love to thank you so much, Sage, for having me, and thank you, Rage, for sponsoring this episode. And
oh, by the way, you get a hat.
I want the purple one.
Very
and I just thank you to anyone and everyone who's listening and tuning in, and hope you guys all have a very happy holidays and a Merry Christmas.
cool. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today as well. And also, I want to give another little shout out. I have a magazine article out in Magic Image Hollywood, and I want to thank Josh for that. It is online. You can also get it at newsstands and Magic Image Hollywood magazine, and there's a little article about me in there for the December issue. So, okay, everyone, thank you so much, and see you next time. And happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Cool. Thanks.